All right, welcome back to PacWest Bigfoot, and just want to give a shout out to Jake, Mr. DeBoma. You have a coffee mug headed out your way here. My wife will be sending that out on Monday, so expect that at some point next week. Anyways, got a few interviews that I've done lately. They'll be out here shortly. And I've got one of them was just, well, they're all really amazing, but there's this one out here from the Oregon coast that you got to hear. I mean, just insanely awesome. I just really enjoyed listening to the whole experience and encounter. So, anyways, that's coming out here pretty soon. And other than that, I will be chatting with you today on live on Facebook, YouTube, where I'll be doing my live stream. So, anyways, God bless you guys from the beautiful Pacific Northwest. And I want to say once again, thank you guys so much for sitting through the adverts on these things. When you sit through the advert, it actually that's how I generate an income here, and it pays for all of this. My time to get in here and do all this keeps everything alive here. Not to mention, you can go over to PacWest Bigfoot. I've got hoodies out there, coffee mugs, all the cool stuff here from the clan. So the PacWest Bigfoot clan. So if you want to get in here and be a part of that and sport it off, people are loving it. I love it, and it's awesome. And my mom loves it, and I love you, mom. So there we go. All right, on. Let me clear my throat and grab some of this lemon water on a nice hot summer day. All right, and we are going to get into our PacWest Bigfoot encounter story this week. McKenzie River fisherman gets a Bigfoot surprise. I am a die-hard fisherman, have been for 30 years now, even in the same place along the McKenzie River where I saw the crazy and wildest thing I'd ever seen in my life, a Bigfoot. It was quite a surprise to see such a thing, and one I'll never forget. I've shared this story and event with a few people, and today I want to share it with you. So here's what I saw and what scared the death out of me as this thing chased me down. Steelhead and the beast. So I love fishing for steelhead, and the McKenzie River is a place I call home for my hobby of fishing after retirement, and before I retired for that matter. I retired about 15 years ago, and it was about the time when I'd see a Bigfoot, a real life in the flesh monster of the woods Bigfoot. I had worked in a lumber mill just outside of Eugene that was practically the only one in existence since the state had ruined the industry. But I worked there for nearly 35 years. I had skipped college and moved my way up the totem pole, if you will, of the company through the years. Eventually, about 15 years ago, like I said, I retired. My wife and I decided to live today up the McKenzie River area ourselves. Since then, we have purchased a nice little home along the river's edge where I fish all I can today. Still, of course, I fish in different lakes and rivers around Southern Oregon, but my backyard is just as good as any place, period. And no, I am not afraid of what is out here in the woods of Oregon. I've seen it, I mean, the scariest thing in the woods here have to offer. And I believe if you keep your head about you and you're cool, you should be just fine. Although I lost my cool that day. But these things I got a sense are wild. These Bigfoot, they're unpredictable, and yes, they look like they are part human and part monkey. I did, for a few minutes at least, feel threatened. Very threatened, in fact. And after reading your other encounters here about a couple other fishermen, well, I thought I should share mine. That way, at least some who share the passion for fishing might be a little more aware of what is really out here and how to handle it. In the middle of nowhere. I was out past Vida, Oregon. Some call it Vita, I call it Vida. Where I would fish. Man, I mean a lot. My good friend from work owned some property next to the river just out of that small and quiet town. He had the proverbial life of Riley on that property. He had the river and a wife that loved fishing almost as much as he did. And they both had a passion for something else besides each other and fishing, and that was Bigfoot. After they lost their newborn to that weird crib death thing, his wife ended up not wanting any more kids. Can't blame her. She took it pretty hard. But no kidding, Dave. They believed and knew for a fact that Bigfoot was real, and they had seen it twice on their property and once in the river near an outcrop of rocks, and it was fishing, they said. Not that I believed them at first. I thought he was joking, but he was not. So I thought he was just confused about what they had seen. You know, mistaken identity of an animal and all. But they were telling the truth. I would soon know as I'd see it myself and near their property, in fact. So let me tell you what I saw and why I think these things are scary and a bit unpredictable. Whitewater black monster. It was Saturday morning, early morning. It was still dark out when I hit the road east of Eugene. I am a morning person, well, northeastern of Eugene, and I am a morning person. I'm up every day at about before out or at or before 5 a.m. without an alarm clock, and I've been like that for as long as I can remember. That morning I was up at 4 a.m. ready to catch some steelhead and have a great day of some epic McKenzie River fishing. I'd been out there before several times, but this incident or visual, and yes, chase, happened not even a year and a half after they bought the place. My buddy said it was the first week when they knew something was afoot around the property, or at least passing through here and there. The first time he'd seen it, he was fishing early in the morning. Where he lives is just in the flat zone, a part of the river where the white water ends and it becomes as still and calm as small harmless clouds passing by. Matter of fact, you could see the clouds reflected in the water. It was so placid at times. But he was fishing that morning just at the foot of the whitewater. The smart play for any fisherman, actually. He was casting and letting it float down a bit down the stream, then let it sit and settle for a bit. He was standing there just over his knees in the water with waders on when he caught movement out of the corner of his eye just up the river in the whitewater. At first he thought it to be another fisherman, then a bear, as it seemed to be all one color, black, and on all fours walking around and hitting the water with its front paw. That foot turned out to be, or paw turned out to be an arm. And that thing turned out to be a monstrous-sized Bigfoot. It stood up, he said, and turned towards him all of a sudden. He described it to be about 9 foot tall, give or take a few inches, and covered in thick black hair. He said it looked like a large gorilla, but it walked like a human, and it had arms and legs like us. They were long arms. The arms, they were long though, the arms, and it was hunched over a bit at the waist, he said. But it stood there in the white water as if it were waiting in a wading pool for kids. It walked right out, he said, and never once did it seem to slip or fall in the torrent of water rushing all around it. It walked off into the rocks and beyond into the forest after looking at him. That was the first time he'd see it. And that is when the encounters and stories I'd hear from the both of them started. But like I said, I thought they were joking around with me, or it was mistaken identity. What in the world is that? Anyway, I had shown up really early. It was somewhat dark outside, not completely, but I would need a flashlight to get to the spot he was telling me about, where he'd been catching some steelhead recently. This was one of the very few homes that far up the river, and he had a very large spread, and I mean land that ran up and across the road and paralleled the river quite a ways from east to west. I parked in the driveway, and everyone, I suppose, was still asleep, but I was not sure. If someone were up, they did not come out to meet me, so they must have been asleep still, I thought. I headed out up a small trail that had been there since before he bought the property. It too, like the river itself, ran the length of the property and beyond. How far? Well, I'm not that sure. I never walked the entire length of it, nor will I today. But I hit the trail heading up the river, and the spot was almost to the back part of his property. So it was quite the walk. By the time I got close to the twin trees, 2 trees, both growing almost out of each other and sitting in the middle of the trail, I did not need a flashlight. I'd brought so much at the time. I could hear the river. The white water was not far above me. It sounded about 50 yards away at most. This was the place he said he had seen that Bigfoot the first time. Boy, did I wish I would have believed him. I got my waders on, rigged up the line, and waded out into the calmer water just below the rush of white water that was far away as I thought it was, about 50 yards. It was really nice, placid, and clear part of the river, I have to say. I was in, and I felt as though I was in heaven for a bit there. But of course, Hades would open up, and I would have the scare of my life. I was getting some strikes. That is what they call them. Some say bites, some say a take, some say hits, but whatever. I was getting some great strikes, and once, just as the sun peeked over the mountains, I had one on. The fight would last about 20 seconds or so, and it wiggled its way off, but I knew it was a steelhead. I cast in again, and this time, as I did, I caught something out of the corner of my eye when I started to, lean forward with the cast. My head shot over, up the river, after I let my line float down and settle. Whatever it was, it seemed to be on all fours, solid black in color and massive, and I mean big. That's a big bear. To me, I've seen plenty of black bear out this way, but this was a big one, I thought. Really, really big. It was on all fours at first as it moved around the water, and I swear it was grabbing at fish, it seemed, as they either swam by it or he found some hole where they were sitting in. After a few seconds or so, I started to second guess that it was, in fact, a bear I was staring at. I reeled in and turned to watch as this thing brought a long, large, and what seemed to be a very muscular arm high up over its head and slapped the water and then stood up. I could not believe it, but I was staring at a creature I was only the day before joking about with my buddy. I was staring at a Bigfoot. I was frozen in awe. Seriously, I could not move as I was just standing there and maybe in a bit of shock as I watched this thing bend down and slap the water again. I was staring at a tall, dark, hairy beast that must have been over 8 feet tall, maybe 9. I finally gathered myself together mentally and started to make my way to the shoreline. That was not a good thing. I guess I should have maybe stood still, I suppose. I stood up straight. As straight as it stood up straight. As straight as it could. It seemed to be bent at the waist a bit, naturally speaking. But it noticed me, and it slapped the water again. But this time, it did while staring in my direction. The sun was to its back, as it was still very early in the morning, so seeing any facial feature was difficult at best with the backlight. But this tall and solid black and hairy thing was massive and looking at me. Its shoulders were wide, extremely wide. I want to say about 3+ feet wide, maybe, give or take. It was black hair for sure, and the head literally sat on the shoulders as if there was no neck at all. When it turned to look at me, it moved nearly its whole body. I got the sense, however, that this thing was not happy to share its obvious fishing hole with me. Walk me home? I watched this thing as it watched me as I moved towards the edge of the river and grabbed my pack. It too started moving. And it was out of the water in literally 2 to 3 strides. And the McKenzie River was wide at this point. Anyways, it was moving like a ghost through the trees and brush behind me as I tried to hurry back to the house. It was hard to move along the trail in some parts, and I had quite a ways to go. At one point, I saw this thing pass me, and I swear I was going to be cut off, but instead it just kept grunting, and even, started barking at me. I've never heard anything like that. I mean, you could almost feel it, like a vibration going right through a tuning fork or something. But it continued to follow me, making the same strange noise. I was pretty scared, I have to say. At one point, I was so scared I had to stop. I stood there against a tree, trying to gather my breath and my wits to move on. It also stopped. The Bigfoot stopped and stood there, just inside the trees and brush. I could see its silhouette in the darkness and shadows. It barked again, and then, to my surprise, it growled the deepest, most guttural growl I've ever heard. Well, I've never heard many growls other than a dog or two in my life, but I knew this had to be different. And suddenly, it charged me. It barked and took like four fast-moving strides forward in my direction, and I bolted. It too kept pace with me as I tried my hardest to get back to the house as fast as I could, and because of the terrain and my surroundings, that made it difficult. I thought for a moment at least that I was in some serious trouble, that I might be gobbled up or at least killed by some ancient beast of the Pacific Northwest, never to be heard from again. Only some remains would be found. I started moving faster and faster, and by the time I got to the bend in the trail that would lead me to the backyard, I fell, tumbling head over heel as a murderous scream came from what seemed right behind me. It was that Bigfoot. He was right there. I could see his large, hairy, hair-covered feet and some of the calves. But that is as far as my eyes would go. I could not look at it. I thought it would just kill me if I did, literally. No sooner did I curl up into a ball when I heard my buddy yelling and let off a shot in the air. "Get out of here!" he yelled. He helped me up, and finally, after an hour or so, I gathered my wits and my mind, and we had a conversation, I have to say, that lasted all day and beyond. Gone fishing on the McKenzie. He told me it wanted me out of here, out of the area, and that it was not going to hurt me. For some reason, I believed him. That is why I finally calmed down and felt okay again, and stayed the rest of the day just fishing off the bank in the backyard with my friend. We talked all day about that thing, what it might be, where it might be living. Personally, my friend believed it was living along a ridge not too far across from the river where I'd first spotted it, or it spotted me. But I promised I would never give the exact location. I think he liked the thing. They, actually, him and his wife. But as for me, it was a very scary animal that should not be trusted. And when you invade its territory, I suggest you do an about-face and move slowly away. But that is my encounter story from along the McKenzie River. Thanks. Bradley.